just start with a small piece called Kalyani Blues. As the name suggests, it's a mixture of the traditional raga Kalyani and a particular blues scale. Thank you. Well, am I sounding clear enough? Yeah. Well, let me just basically say the fact that I am an Indian classical musician, trained and, in the typical tradition style, wanting to adapt and pretty much having adapted certain new modern musical standards and trying to take the whole basic idea of Indian classical music into a much more newer format. I'll just give a small introduction about myself, and I'm Prakash Sontakke, born in a family of typical Hindustani classical musician family in this great holy city of Varanasi. The next slide, please. This is where I was born and brought up before coming and settling in Bangalore. And as I'm trying to say that the fact that Varanasi is one of the most sought after traditional towns, if you say, in the whole world knows the Varanasi as Kashi and the great Ganges. So my story is a little different in terms that I was born and brought up in this Varanasi, went to a convent education school, St. John's. The next slide, please. much of my education, as you can see, was very interesting. And I spent a lot of time with books and trying to figure out how and which way I could prosper better. But that's the beauty of education. Till the time it lasts, you never really understand the importance of it. Next. At home, because of being a Hindustani classical family, my father was teaching me the violin, the Hindustani violin, and vocal, because he was a double doctorate in both. And my mother was teaching me this beautiful instrument, the Hawaiian guitar, in its most pristine form, which you can see there. I think this is the class, probably 4th standard or something. I still have that guitar with me. And the do's and don'ts of the typical Indian classical music household are pretty obvious. If we move to the next slide, we can see. So, you know the do's and don'ts in a Hindustani classical household. You're not allowed to listen to Michael Jackson, but there are so many other panditjis that you have to listen to. But in my family, my parents never really put any restrictions on what I should be listening, and luckily so I had a lot of friends around who were giving me some amazing amount of recordings, and that's when a few of those occasions that I heard Grateful Dead. Next slide. And you know, the typical dilemma of which hairstyle to follow for how many years. You know, it's quite cool to have long hair, but the school doesn't allow you to do that. And at home, they're trying to do this to you. So, yeah, next slide. This was something which I heard in my 7th or 8th grade, and I think most of you might know. And for those who don't know, this is the album cover of the famous Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon. The next slide. And this is the instrument that I saw. The most beautiful thing about this instrument and the sound. So all that I can just. I guess you'll have known which song this is. This is Breathe in the Air, the famous song. And typically that Indian household that I was, and I was listening to the same rag, the same melody in a very different way. Because being the Indian... in our system. Sagama dani dani pani ni pama pagama dani pagama re. So that was the similarity that I was listening to in this music, and this led me into believing that it's the same instrument which is just in a moment sounding totally Indian, and the very next moment sounding totally rock and whatever. This led me to going on to discover something more beautiful about that is a brilliant idea that I had. Yeah. So this is, I guess you can make out by the way the hats are designed, these are all country music stars. And I suddenly got this passion to listen to lot of country music. And surprised to see that most of the country music, there is this beautiful instrument, Dobro. This was a very big surprise for me because in every single melody I was listening to certain ragas of our system, and there, on the other hand, there is this beautiful music thing. So this inspired one of my typical pieces called Heart Sky. That was the influence of the Dobro on my music when the piece called Heart Sky, which I wrote. And that was the realization of the fact that if I have to progress in music and try to understand not just my tradition, to also understand the other traditions in the world, was to get to know a little about Western music. And that was the chart which I made, the basic must-know chords. How to understand that, these typical chords, how we can use them in the context of Western music. And then another discovery was the beautiful altered scales, how to complicate your life further doing this, So alternative tunings and so many beautiful ideas where I have tuned the guitar to a minor, but I'm getting a major chord. So the beauty of alternative tuning and the greatest discovery of the fact that the entire Indian classical music, the Hindustani classical music and the Western classical music both share an exact similar beginning. They both believe in the major scale, and which is very different from any other system in the world. The Hindustani and the Western are also based very much on the harmony concepts. The ragas have to be based on harmony. If you do not have harmony, you're not going to be getting the exact traditional raga system. But the only designing is it is designed in a different way. We don't play two. That's where we usually differ. And then, of course, my passion for guitar, listening to lots and lots of guitar, and the great influences of my life, Pandit Brijbhushan Kabra, Pandit Devashish Bhattacharya, and the great Jeff Beck. When I say Jeff Beck, I have to just play a small basic line. This particular tune completely blew my mind because I couldn't imagine somebody from some other country understanding this whole concept so beautifully. For those who knew the piece, it's Nadia. And because of being written in English, people read it as Nadia. Quite often in the West, I have been asked to play Nadia. And then I made this own instrument. Sadly, I didn't get the instrument today because it's broken. And this was basically designed out of the sheer need for travel. The very, very thin and rectangular, the whole concept was, because we are going line out anyway, we don't need a very big acoustic body. This was the instrument which I made. And then typical that, I was lucky enough to play with lots and lots of traditional Indian classical musicians, violin, Carnatic violin, Hindustani violin, sarod, sitar, santoor, name it, and I have collaborated with these musical instruments because I want to show the beauty of this instrument and how exactly it can adapt to any kind of musical style. Next. And I was lucky enough to have gotten the Vox Populi Awards, that is the Independent World Music Awards in Canada, and it also got award in Nashville, the great house of country music. And next. This was one great musician who inspired me, the Steinar Gregretsen, is no more. And this is thanks to technology and YouTube and stuff like that, where he heard one of my pieces and he sent me a message saying that you are a very good musician, but you need to have good instruments. And that was the beginning of the story. Then I also was lucky to meet with Bob Brosman, another legendary blues, and I don't think there was any style which he didn't play. He could play anything. And he was also very instrumental in my style, where he saw me in Canada once and he came and spoke to me and said what exactly I need to work on my style. And then this whole unique world-class guitars which I am having today, the Asher, then the Weissenborn, same old concept again explained further in the next photograph. Guitars, concerts, venues, more and more concerts. Next slide. It's stuck. Yeah, and this was one beautiful thing of the electronics. How certain things about electronics are so beautiful. Electronics doesn't always mean that we are going away from the music which we are doing. Whichever form of music, electronics could be a major complement. And I use electronics a lot of times to even explain certain basic beautiful concepts of the alap. Then these two musicians a duo called Food, which I met, which encouraged me into taking up guitar electronics in a much more different and interesting way. Lots of concerts in Norway, Denmark, and different parts of the world, which really inspired me into understanding that even jazz is a very, very, very free form, though not so free for the Indian style, because we are always tied down by the certain melodic structures, and they are so free they can just move out of the melody structures, go into different scales and experiment very freely. Next. Oh God, that's me. Next. This album released to the ECM was called Mercurial Balm. And it was an interesting experiment because for me I was just a Hindustani musician in this entire mix of improvising jazz, and I was just enjoying myself, having a ball. And that album has sold various copies all over the world. Next. Another experiment which I did is, most of the time the conditioning of the listeners, if we are conditioned to only listen to this and that, and we think that this is all I like to listen to and this is all I don't like to. Most of my concerts, as I'm showing you today, it's a typical way that I take my concerts also across to people. And I find that people just like it. It's not that they have to be told what music, what style. They just listen. People are ready to listen. It's just that we feel that only certain kind of music will work somewhere. And then, of course, in memory of my parents, this 2013, I did this Global Music Festival where I called across these beautiful musicians from all over the world to come and play in these different corners of the city and interact with different musicians. Next. So these are almost 100 musicians participated. Of course, I couldn't fit 100 in a collage. But then that's the whole idea, that most of the musicians were not just me playing with the foreign guests. I had myself and many more musicians playing, so that these interactives are going to be suitably helpful for them also to make interactions with different musicians abroad and try something for themselves. So my last summing up is, music is learning, music is skill, music is exploration, music is fun, music is an experience. Music is an inner awesome feeling, nothing like joy of music. Music in itself is the only genre. It's not about different genres in music, it's music by itself which is the greatest genre. So all we need to do is just listen, listen. The next slide. Thank you. And a special thanks to TED. Really, how can I say that? Ever since I saw TED, I wanted. So I'm glad that I could share all this information with you. And now you can try looking up the videos on the YouTube anyway. Thank you so much.